thank you to Brand Innovators for hosting us. Love these opportunities. So great to meet Kathleen and get to know a little bit more about her and Babe Wine for sure. And I love your background. So that's awesome. Love it. A quick intro just on my end. I started my media career on the agency side. And then after many, many years, I made the leap over to the publisher platform side. So I'm currently on the partnerships team at Influential, which is one of the largest influencer marketing companies in the space. We are an IBM Watson exclusive partner and have an extremely sophisticated technology and measurement. So we're able to track the consumer journey and deliver real results for brands. So a little bit about my background and where I am. And Kathleen, I'll let you intro yourself, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about your background.
Yeah, hi. So I also started on the agency side. Actually, I've been working in sort of digital agency side, started agency side about 11 or 12 years ago. So right when all the platforms were super, super nascent. And from there, I did a little bit of a stint at a CMS platform, software as a service company. So doing digital strategy there. And then I landed at Samsung. So that was my first sort of brand side role. I was at Samsung for, I guess, almost 5 years, which is crazy. But there I was leading digital specifically for the mobile business and all of their platforms. So that was really, really cool. It was a really formative sort of time for me in my career. And then after that, did a stint at MetLife Financial Services. So really enjoyed doing sort of brand there. And then about a year ago, I landed at Anheuser-Busch in my current role where I lead marketing for the Babe Wine team.
Awesome. Love it. That's a great, I feel like that's such a solid background too. Lots of different experiences, different brands, which I think is super helpful, especially in this world of, marketing. And obviously, so knowing this topic is women in marketing, and obviously how gender equality has really increasingly been at the forefront of everything these days. Would love to just hear a little bit about your experiences either in the past or obviously now at AB when it comes to diversity and inclusion and anything on that topic.
Yeah, no, of course. I think, for any woman, especially being in marketing for the past sort of, over 10 years, I've seen sort of the differences in how seriously companies have begun to take gender equality as well as sort of D&I initiatives across the board. I've been really lucky. I've had only female bosses and they've all been amazing. So have had an amazing career in that way, really big proponent of sort of female mentorship. I think that's how I've gotten where I've gotten, as being mentored by really strong women who have, decided to help the woman that's next, right? I actually was just texting with my former boss from Samsung right before this call. And she was like, talking to me about some ideas she had for her current role. So, it's nice to have that network of sort of professional women. So I'm a big proponent of that. Specifically AB, we actually have an internal group called Women in Beer, where people can connect, right? I think beer traditionally, when you think about it, very masculine, but AB has really taken to heart, D&I and has been pushing for gender equality, gender inclusivity, as well as sort of broader diversity and inclusion initiatives for a while now. So it's really cool to be at a company that's focusing on that, especially at a time like now.
For sure. And that's awesome to hear that. I also was lucky to have like my mentor and my one of my bosses for 10 years who's a woman. And I, to this day, the same thing. I mean, I just had dinner with her last week, from the agency side. And it's nice to hear that you've had these female role models and bosses and mentors. Cause when I've talked to other people too, that just haven't had that, it is definitely a different experience if you really only sort of had either male bosses. So I love to hear that.
Yeah.
And so, you said, mentorship is super important. Do you think that now that has played a big role in your career success? Do you, again,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I essentially, from my role at Samsung, when I ended up at MetLife, I think of personal relationships as a really important part of your career, right? I mean, that's how we exist. We're humans. We want to make connections. We want to know people. We want to understand their journeys. I had a mentor at Samsung who actually went over to MetLife, and that was the reason that I went there. She's a really strong woman. She was very, very many levels above me in the Samsung hierarchy, and yet was sort of able to be a mentor to me and give me some of her time, which was really, really valuable. And I think the reason I even ended up at MetLife was sort of on her recommendation and finding a role for myself that was more brand oriented. And those kind of opportunities and journeys, I think having another woman, you know, stick out their neck for you or give you that opportunity is just so important. So it's been really impactful for me. And I've sort of tried to do the same to emulate sort of my mentors in that way as I've sort of become more and more of a senior leader at companies to show people opportunities, to help women grow. And I think sometimes the hard thing is that as a woman, sometimes the right role for someone that you're mentoring might not be on your team anymore, right? Sometimes it might be that they've outgrown where they are. And I think all leaders, all bosses, you know, that's something you have to grapple with. And that's a real important, humbling experience to say, I really want to keep you, but I know that for your growth, you need to go in this direction. And I've been lucky enough to have women who've done that for me. So I try to emulate that behavior as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's awesome. And yeah, I think even knowing that and making that pivot or having those sort of those conversations, but still being able to be that mentor for some of these people too. I think that's huge, and still, you know, still being in their lives and in a you know, career type of way. But that's really great to hear. I think I would love to hear a little bit more about Babe Wine, because I'm obviously a huge personal fan of it. I think it's amazing and I love the branding. So if you want to tell us a little bit more about Babe Wine and what your role encompasses there.
Yeah, so I've been at Babe for about a year. Babe is a canned wine. You can see it behind me. Once again, I like to have it up. I like to sit between two giant hands just as a but no, Babe is a canned wine. Babe was acquired by AB in 2019, but was actually founded a couple years prior to that by, I don't know if you're familiar with the Instagram influencer, The Fat Jewish, call him Josh, but Josh and David Oliver Cohen and his brother Tanner founded Babe based on a rosé shortage that they noticed in the Hamptons. So they created bottles, but they also created this canned SKU. And really it's the wine sort of that has the occasions of a beer, right? It's portable, it's convenient, but it has that wine taste and that refreshing wine flavor. But you can bring it to the park, you can drink it on a couch, you can have it in your fridge. It's single serve, which was great during the pandemic. Let me tell you, it's like, okay, just one can, not a bottle.
Right. I always struggle with that. I always feel like it's really nice to have the single serving of the wine.
Of course. Yeah. And as you've seen, I mean, I think, you know, when Babe started, there were only a few major players, and the category has really exploded from a canned wine standpoint over the past couple of years as people look for that more convenient solution. And, you know, as younger consumers sort of enter into the wine space and want a wine taste, which is, you know, a classic taste that people really enjoy, but they want more of those different occasions or those experiences that are more social and that allow for more flexibility. So that's kind of Babe's motto. As a brand, we are really all about, you know, making you feel seen. We say we're no bullshit. We're simplicity. You know, our flavors are rosé, white, red. We're not telling you the top notes and the bottom notes. You don't have to feel sort of excluded by us. And so we're also very inclusive. We talk to a lot of different types of people. I think there's a misconception that Babe's consumer might be predominantly women, but, you know, that is not entirely the case. We have a big chunk of men that really enjoy drinking our beverage. You know, there's also older consumers. People think, oh, it's just millennials, but that's not the case as well. Yeah. So it's a really inclusive sort of no bullshit, making you feel seen in kind of your best moments brand. And so that's why I love working there.
I was just going to say, I feel like rosé too, specifically. I mean, most of my male friends, like all my guy friends, like they love rosé. I mean, I think rosé has really, really like trajectory of for drinking on the male side has like gone up, because I really, you know, they love it.
No, of course. And I think there's definitely, I mean, rosé started out as sort of this seasonal thing, and it's become kind of this all year round drink. It's become a much more diverse drink that's drank by various different types of people. And, you know, it's interesting because I think there was this conception or this halo of sort of wine as this feminine thing, but actually, you know, if you're at a concert or a venue or a game, I mean, soon, you know, we can all go back to that hopefully. But if you're looking for something that's also a bang for your buck solution, wine is a higher ABV and it has, you know, that taste that people really like. So we see a lot of male consumers reaching for it in those situations where they want, you know, they don't necessarily want liquor, but they want something that has a little bit more punch. Yeah. And Babe is that solution for them.
That's awesome. Yeah. Big fan of it. So, and now obviously looking back on this past sort of year and what the impact it's had, obviously on the world, but I think the impact to it on brands and marketing is multifaceted. Would love to hear just like a little bit more about how it's played a role for Babe. Knowing, again, I think in the beginning again of the pandemic on our side, we did some research, and obviously alcohol sales sort of skyrocketed, but then there were some issues. Obviously it wasn't in bars and like you just said, concerts and sporting events and things like that. But we did, I mean, it was insane how quickly that percentage of alcohol sales went up in the beginning of the pandemic. But would love to hear a little bit of your take on this past year and how it played a role.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually started at Babe right at the beginning of the pandemic, which is a really weird time to start any job. So that was super fun. I think for me, it's funny coming from Samsung and Met. At MetLife, I was more in a brand role, but at Samsung, which was almost 5 years of my career, I was predominantly digital performance marketing, social oriented. And I thought that the Babe role was going to be much more about BTL and trade and retail. And I was really excited to learn all of that stuff. But you kind of have, when you're interviewing, you kind of have to be like, I can do this, even though I haven't done this before necessarily. And then I get there and immediately they're like, we need to sell everything online. And I was like, you're in luck because that's actually what I'm the best at. So let's do that. But no, I mean, I think there's a couple different ways that we sort of dealt with it from a Babe standpoint, right? I mean, obviously it's a humanitarian crisis. So there's a couple of brand initiatives that we kicked off, but I think the first and the very immediate reaction is there was a really big change in the way consumers were consuming alcohol across the board. So usually people are consuming it, they're buying it at stores, they're buying it in grocery, they're buying it in convenience, but they're also consuming it at venues, bars, restaurants, venues like a sporting venue, concerts, these things that we feel so forward and we can't do anymore. And that immediately took a hit. But what offset it, to your point, was that, we saw a lot of people ordering online. And a lot of people don't know this, but actually wine is unique within the United States in that you can actually sell it direct to consumer. You cannot do that in the same way with beer because of the 3-tier system where it has to be sold through a wholesaler. So we can actually sell our wine DTC. We can also sell it through a lot of these sort of e-commerce platforms that beer uses as well, like a Drizzly or a Minibar, which are sort of a third party that helps facilitate the purchase from a consumer. So we did all of it. We sold it on our website. We really kind of made our website this consumer hub where we had a community built. We sold on Drizzly. We did a lot of Drizzly initiatives. We worked with Minibar, there's GoPuff. There's just all these new platforms that have really sprung up because people's behavior completely shifted. And it's really interesting. I know Anna was on here. Globally, the US is different than a lot of other places. If you're in Asia, people are buying alcohol online in way higher percentages than they've ever done in the United States. And what we saw with the pandemic was all of a sudden, it was gradually moving to more and more online, but it was like this immediate shift where a lot of these platforms had to rotate more into e-com to offset for that demand. So I think it was in some ways really cool because you got to see consumer behavior changing rapidly in a way that you don't normally see. You see it happen gradually, but so Babe really leaned into DTC and e-com. And then from a brand standpoint, we did a couple of fun initiatives, really just based on the insight of we see you, we kind of see what you're going through and the specificity of it. And, wine can help, right? No matter what's going on, we think wine might be a solution. And there's an honesty in that. I think that is hard. A lot of brands went the route of, there was this amazing like Supercut commercial of all the first pandemic brand commercials where it said the same thing, like, in this unprecedented time, we're here for you, we love you. And it's like, thanks, Burger King. Like, I guess that's nice. And there's a real honesty, I think, in a brand kind of saying, yeah, we're here for you. We're going to give you some free wine, or we're here for you. We're going to give you a manicure because you couldn't get one, and not like we're going to do something that doesn't actually make sense for us to do as a brand.
Yep. I feel like those initiatives that you had during the pandemic were super interesting. And I loved obviously the giveaway and then the manicure truck. I mean, that was like genius. And I think there is something to be said to be working with a brand like Babe, where it's very much out of the box and very much of like, let's, they kind of disrupt the industry or disrupt the category and see what works. But that's awesome. But yeah, I guess still on that point, knowing that kind of that canned wine Babe has disrupted the beverage industry straight out of the gate. Is there a little bit more you can tell us about this approach or again, anything that you think you see maybe changing or innovations in the next year or so. But I do think that the canned wine and it being different than what it was is definitely like a new approach these days.
Yeah, it's interesting, I think, because, well, first of all, you mentioned sort of marketing, disruptive marketing, and I always quote him, and he's gonna sue me for trademark infringement at one point, but not my direct boss, my boss's boss, because he's a man. But at Samsung, my boss's boss is a guy named Nick Tran. He's now head of marketing at TikTok.
Oh, I just saw that. Yeah,
he's amazing. I keep quoting him. He's gonna be like texting me, like, stop quoting me, Kathleen. But he always talks about marketing at the speed of culture, and that's something I really got from him at Samsung. I think it's really important. People label it as disruptive, but really, I think it's just speaking to other human beings about what they find interesting and what they're talking about at that given moment, versus kind of, approaching things with a lens of a really long strategic framework that someone from Bain helps you put together. That's great. But if you're not on the pulse of what's actually happening in culture as a marketer, I believe that you're failing. So I think where Babe was really able to be nimble and jump on these moments of, okay, people haven't had a manicure in 4 months. Let's help them, right? Another fun thing that we did was we released an election kit. After the first debate, we saw social mentions of wine go up 65% day over day from the day prior, right? People were just like, I need wine, I need wine, I need wine. So we essentially created this election kit that we released for the week of the election, where you have a bottle of wine. We sort of relabeled one of our old bottles. It says polls opening, or polls closing, bottles opening. You got Babe, which obviously you need the cans, right? We had a pillow that said scream here that you could scream into if you needed it, right? So we just sort of released this amazing moment, and turned it around in 2 weeks. And we were doing this based on real-time consumer inputs. So I think that's something that I do definitely think it's disruptive, but I think it's more and more the norm. And you look at, and I use Burger King in a pejorative way, and I didn't mean that, because you actually look at Burger King in terms of their marketing. They're a great example of a group that does that in their pandemic marketing, where they had the masks where you could read your order. All of that stuff is really in that space of marketing at the speed of culture. And I really, really love it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that it's so interesting, again, back on like my agency days when brands were planning, and they were planning for 6 months in advance for something that was going to be in the future, obviously. But to your point, like that's a traditional way of doing it. And now, given these brands that we're seeing, Burger King, even an Oreo, or some of these brands that are really reacting in real time. And that's something obviously our company does, is all about social listening and looking at the trends and being able to pivot your content or whatever it may be to make to have it to live in this current culture, which I think is hugely impressive. And I think everyone, when they see it, it's like, whether it's a tweet from a brand, and they're like, oh my god, that was so smart, that was so quick, and it really does resonate. Like a Wendy's as well, I feel like they're on top of it too. But seeing these brands react, and again, like you said, you were able to pull that off in a couple of weeks. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, we're lucky because we're a small company within a large company, right? Which is kind of a sweet spot. You have the ability to be nimble, but you have sort of the backing of this larger company that supports you and your choices, which is like being a kid that's like living at home but has their first job. They have their own income, but they're still like, well, my parents have got my back.
Yep.
But no, I mean, and another analogy, this is my analogy, not Nick Tran's, that I like to use is it's sort of, you kind of have a cake and you need the sprinkles and the frosting, right? So you still need to think structurally about what your themes are. And, especially for alcohol, because we're working with trade deadlines, and our trade partners and our wholesale partners are so important to our business. But, you have the cake, and then you have the sprinkles and the icing. And that's the stuff that you need to be really nimble with if you're going to be relevant today.
For sure. Yes. And yeah, I guess to that point, I think we touched on this a little bit, but no, because I do think it's such an interesting category, and like you mentioned, but how important is it? Obviously you're reacting quickly, but how important is sort of that research and that understanding of your consumer, and like that whole creative process, and what how does that look when you're planning, and especially when it comes to the consumer?
Yeah, so we actually look at our consumers, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier. We don't look primarily at demographics. I mean, we definitely use demographics from a consumer standpoint, but we really think of our consumer as more of an affinity or a mindset-based consumer. And that's because there is such a diversity in who is drinking our drink. So for us, there's passion points that we think through, right? We have pets. Pets are a huge passion point for us. There's pop culture, specific reality TV shows, things like that we're really on the pulse of from a marketing standpoint. And then of course, when we're looking at different affinity-based consumers, we sort of use that information to target people accurately with our performance marketing. And what you're able to do then is sort of create a community of first-party data, right? Your own first-party data community. And then you can start to even segment more strategically based on the information you've been given. So we do look at geos a lot, right? And especially with alcohol, there's different rules in different geographies. So we have different sort of centers of gravity where we focus in different levels of marketing. And that's something that you can do via the platforms like Facebook and Google, but also via the first party data that we're given. And we have our own D2C platform, which really helps us with that, right? We can get your information, we can learn more about you. And we actually see a great influx of customers from email, which in my old role, like the email open rates that we see at Babe, I would have just fainted for it. So like, it's absolutely crazy. So really just a ravenous community that really wants to know more. So I think it has to be a bit of both from a consumer standpoint. You have to sort of top of funnel drive awareness, and we use our passion points to kind of source new consumers in that way. But then you also have to make sure you're taking care of your community. And we use our first party data and those sort of more own platforms to continue talking to people there.
For sure. And it's funny that you said that about like, yeah, the email openings. Cause like that is something that where, my previous publisher that I was at, I'm like, I don't know that anyone ever opens emails, but like, if you're seeing that rate and you're like, oh my God, people are opening them and reading them and like, this is working, then there's, obviously something to that. But in that sort of same vein, like when cause I know that obviously Babe you're doing so many cool things from a marketing standpoint. But what does success sort of look like, across your teams, and, what is that ROI, or is it changing the perception, or is it brand lift? Because again, is it the viral, having something go viral? What does, sort of success look like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we're a small brand. So for us, success is sales and growth, right? So I think it's important as marketers to understand how the ROI of a more awareness driving marketing initiative ties back to that ultimate goal of, sales and revenue. So that's something that we work on a lot. And AB is a great company in terms of sort of business acumen knowledge. You really learn a lot. You're very close to the brand. I report directly to the GM, have full visibility into kind of the P&L and the work that goes into the various programs that we run, and sort of how everything ties back to our ultimate goal of selling wine, right? And expanding our portfolio and our consumer base. So, I think it's sort of a meta answer, but it's an interesting question because it depends on where you are too. If you're a brand whose awareness is 99%, you may be trying to do different things from an awareness standpoint. You may be looking for sort of share of mind in a specific moment, right? Samsung, we did a lot of that, like share of mind at the Oscars, share of mind at a specific cultural touch point. But if you're more of a growth brand, your awareness is usually lower. And so for you, you're thinking driving awareness with new people, but also again, driving that repeat consumption, building loyalty, so you can get that sort of word of mouth flywheel that is driving, again, our ultimate goal, which is to sell the product. So
no, that's great. And then so when you're looking, I know we kind of touched on this, but curious if you have any insights into what, innovation looks like for this category. Because obviously, again, we talked about it's been disruptive, but any predictions or is there anything that you can, tell us about any cool marketing that's coming up, or, again, products, innovations, anything new in the next couple months or year?
Well, I will say, Babe, we just released an innovation actually over the past couple of months. It was released in January and it's been expanding nationally, called Babe 100. So it is basically a light version of our classic rosé. Again, I'll give it a white. But it is it is a light and refreshing version of it. It's only 100 calories per can, and it's still 7% ABV. So it's really kind of a seltzer equivalent from a calories and stats standpoint, but it tastes like wine. So for me, someone who really loves the low stats of a seltzer, but doesn't necessarily love the tastes and sort of wants a more full flavor experience, this is like the perfect product. I've been drinking it, gangbusters. So that's something that we've just recently released that, if you haven't already seen it, the can is beautiful. It's a very on-trend shade of lavender. But if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's nationally rolling out. You can find it at a lot of different stores, Target, Kroger, HEB, everywhere. So recommend that. And then in terms of kind of where I think momentum is going, right? I mean, that's an obvious one, Babe 100, because we've seen this trend toward health and wellness continue to be more and more important to consumers as years have gone on. This is my opinion. It doesn't reflect any opinion of my employer or really any data. So just take it for what it's worth. But I think, none of us really know what to expect in terms of a response after a pandemic like this. Our only analog that's in recent history is from a time in which, automobiles were just developed. Like it's such a different, how can you compare that to a time with the internet? People are saying, oh, it's going to be the roaring 20s, but who knows? And I think people are so much more aware of their time, and something that I think the pandemic gave people a chance to do was really step back. So for me, I'm really interested in the things that brands like Calm are doing, talking to Anna about non-alc. Like I think there's an opportunity for a space for oneself. And yes, I think people are going to have a month of going absolutely crazy, but I do think that there's going to be this preservation of these moments that we didn't have before. We were all very go, go, go. So how do I preserve that moment for me? How do I preserve that moment for my family, for my partner, for my pet? And I think that brands will need to be respectful and tap into that versus just leaning so heavily into the, it's party time. Right. I hope it's party time, right? I'm dying to see live music again, but that's the kind of, I think there'll be a balance that we'll need to strike.
And actually that leads me, yes, I agree. I feel like I've heard the roaring 20s by a lot of people. And I was like, I definitely, especially because it's paired with like the summer, I feel like, there is that, but it will be interesting to see how everything else kind of reacts and bounces back and beyond just people, ready to go, obviously, parties, concerts, all of that. But I do think that leads actually perfectly into this question is, what's one thing that you are looking forward to personally and professionally in this upcoming year?
Personally, so I just got vaccinated, which is really exciting. So I'm very excited to do karaoke and go to see live music. The thing that I miss the most, I just any live music, I don't even care. It can be, like an open mic. Like I just need to see music live in a bar or something again. And then karaoke, I mean, there's I don't even need to explain it. Everyone gets it. Karaoke is amazing. I worked at Samsung for a long time, so I'm very fond of the Korean barbecue karaoke night. So
very, very well versed in that. I love that.
Yeah. And then professionally, I mean, it's hard because I think we've had an amazing year despite a lot of challenges at Babe, but I'm really looking forward to, venues reopening and these places that Babe is really a great fit for opening back up. And we can see, more people discovering the product and getting the cans in hands. So that'll be really important for us. If you're, again, it's such a great use case for that occasion, for a venue, for a concert, for a sporting event. And it was sad to not have that, right? Because it's a great discovery vehicle for us as well. So I'm excited for that to happen, both for the culture and for our product.
That's awesome. And yeah, to your point about karaoke, so funny because that is something that is like just been, obviously you could do it in your apartment, but like it is something that has been missed in the last year. But I actually too was just recently vaccinated, and I went to a comedy show on Friday, and which was like it was like so new and different and amazing. And then actually Jerry Seinfeld happened to surprise us and like open up, and it was one of these things where I was like, this is an NYC moment, what I've missed like over the past year. And it felt so good because it felt like things that we took for granted that happened. And it was really one of those like amazing moments. It was awesome.
Cool.
Yes. Okay. So I think we're going to get to some questions. We have a few here. So, this is a good question. How do you maintain the feel of a startup, given that, and I know you've only been there for a year, but given obviously this, probably was a startup and then got acquired, are there things that you do or that the Babe does to maintain that startup-y feel?
Honestly, it's hard for me because I have not worked there, not virtually. So I will give you an answer, but it's hard for me to even, it's just hard to contextualize because I'm like, we all hang out in the office. That doesn't happen. So there's no real, so from a cultural standpoint, I mean, we have an engagement committee. We have a culture sort of open and transparent conversations that I think is a holdover from Babe, but it's, honestly, that's also very AV. AV has that similar culture. I think from a nimble standpoint and sort of a scrappy, Babe has a very let's do it. We're going to do it quickly and we're going to do it for less mentality that the founders have really instilled in people. And I think that has been something that we've really maintained, especially in a world where there's a lot of different brands and the budgets are very different depending on what brand you are. So we have to really be scrappy sometimes. And I think the founders have made it a value that we think about things and their cost efficiency. So that's something that's definitely been maintained. From a cultural standpoint, we've done virtual happy hours and stuff. I can't wait till we're all back in the office full time. I think that'll really help the culture, continue to grow and maintain that feeling of community.
And so just a personal question. Yeah. So how was it? Cause you started, I'm assuming, so you didn't even go in office. You started during, yeah. How was that kind of onboarding start? Like, how was that process for you? And how were you able to, cause I do think it's really hard to, kind of get to know some people, and that the beginning when you're starting a new job, like, being in office is super helpful. So curious how that process was for you.
Yeah, no, there's actually a lot of cross-pollination between Samsung and AB. So that was lucky. I had some friends, not at Babe, but friends that worked cross-functionally at the larger organization. So that was super important. I think that, it's a small, Babe itself was small. So that did help that I was able to have these, smaller conversations with people. It's a 20 something person team versus jumping into like a 75 or 100 person team. But it's always good to have those again. And that's what I mentioned, mentorship, right? These are mostly women that I'm talking about that are my friends at the organization. So it's good to have them help you set up coffee chats and meet people via Zoom, and people were really generous with their time in that way. So that really helped. I think without that, I would have been feeling a little lost just because I would have been kind of out on an island, meeting my team, but not knowing how to get anything cross-functionally done because I wasn't in an office and I couldn't go, knock on someone's window and say, "Hey, I'm Kathleen." Yeah.
Okay. Oh, that's a good question. Someone wrote, "I loved your election night package. Any other upcoming packages for days like for Memorial Day, big sporting events, etc.? Anything in the docket?"
So I am literally looking at my phone right now because we had something that's going live today. So take a look at our Instagram. Not a package, but a sweep that I think is really specific to our home city of New York. So you can take a look at that after this. I don't know if it's live yet. I can't do both things at once, but so that's really exciting. And then, yeah, I mean, I can't give you anything other than just stay tuned. We definitely have a lot of really exciting stuff coming up for the summer, especially as things start to reopen. So I can't wait for you all to see them.
That's awesome.
Thank you for saying you loved our election kit. It was one of my favorite things we did as well. It sold out 4 times. We could not keep it in stock to save our lives. So we had to stop selling it so it could make it in time for the election.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And yes, it looks like 1 hour ago, this giveaway alert went live. So everyone go check out the Babe Instagram. And then someone asked about, can you speak to how you consider environmental issues or how you market your products with that in mind? This is a common issue that I see pop up a lot for beverage companies. So anything in that environmental side of things?
Yeah, I think AB has a lot of really great information on our website about this, but they are very, very committed to this. Actually, Budweiser has done a lot, specifically Budweiser, the brand, in terms of water and thinking about that environmental impact of our products. I can say from a marketing standpoint with Babe, it's not one of our pillars, right? I mean, I think the AV portfolio really takes it on specifically in more of the hero brands. Not that we don't care about it at Babe, we certainly do. It's just as a portfolio, it's more heavied up on the Budweiser side. But yeah, I mean, I'd recommend taking a look. It's actually, I was fascinated. I didn't know a ton about supply chain and all of the things that go into sort of developing and making beverages. And AB really takes environmental impact seriously. And it's been another initiative that they've really cared about and been pushing, similar to D&I over the past, few years. So there's a lot of really cool information out there about that. for us, we're actually really focused on social inclusion and inclusivity. So more to come from us with that this summer too, especially with our sort of brand tenet of being that inclusive wine that's not not stuffy and not going to leave you out. So stay tuned for that as well. I want to tell everyone, but I'm having to like stop myself.
Love it. We'll stay tuned. Oh, I like this question, actually. This is a different side of things, but someone asked, how do you ask someone to be your mentor?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, honestly, because I don't think there's one set way. I'll say I've never had anyone say no, but sometimes it's more of a, like, we are buddies, and then I'm kind of like, you're my mentor, right? And they're like, yeah. And sometimes it's way more official. I think it depends on the culture of your company as well. AB has a culture in which coffee chats with sort of the senior leaders are encouraged and really supported, and the senior leader will be willing to take the time to talk to you and have a coffee chat and discuss sort of mentorship opportunities. So I think the culture really helps there. Another way that I've done it, and I think that COVID is sort of paradoxically helped with, is it's a huge investment sometimes, especially in New York, to like get a drink or get a coffee. It's difficult. You're moving back and forth, you're all commuting and all those things. So a phone call is a really nice way to sort of begin a conversation, or a Zoom call now. So I've done things like, asked a friend, had a friend who I see has a contact at a company that I'm interested in meeting, and I sort of asked them to set me up with that person and have a phone call or have a Zoom call to meet them. And sometimes it's one or two conversations. Sometimes it's you have each other's numbers and you kind of know that you can ask them questions. Sometimes it's a more official, like, let's meet every 3 months. But I think it depends, and it's really all about just kind of feeling it out and getting up the courage to ask, because most people are really receptive.
Totally. And I think to your point in the beginning of just being like, you're right, that's sort of how I approach it. When I talk about my like old boss and mentor, I'm like, well, she's my old boss and mentor. I just let her know that she is that. So I kind of exactly
mentor,
Yeah, I just put it on her. And then last question here, what, if any, advice would you give your younger self?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I think my younger self was really into digital stuff. So I would tell my younger self to keep doing that, because it definitely became a bigger thing than I could have even dreamed when I was just doing blogger outreach back in the early aughts. But that's one thing I would give myself advice on. And also I think that, and this is some advice I've gotten that I find really helpful, especially if you're really driven and you're kind of a more type A person, it can be really tempting to compare yourself to people and to look at other people's paths and be like, well, mine's not lining up with that, I'm clearly failing. And I think no paths are linear, like normalize non-linear career paths. I've seen really successful, really smart people take different paths that I might have thought as a younger person were the obvious one. And I think it's really important to remember that.
For sure. No, I love that. And I think that that's, again, comparing yourselves to others is never really helps. And I think, again, everyone has their own path. So I love that piece of advice.
Awesome. Yeah, that was great. That was a great kind of closing question. I relate to that, because LinkedIn is like the worst social media platform for me versus like Facebook and Instagram, just because of that like constant comparison, and it just comes up on your feed without you even looking for it. So really appreciate that. Maybe I need to take the LinkedIn app off my phone.
A great TikTok handle, I can't remember who it is, but that someone's spoofing like the funny LinkedIn post where people are like, I got into an elevator today and I saw this person and they gave me like the sort of new nuances of the LinkedIn influencer. It's pretty funny.
No, it's really interesting. Well, Kathleen and Liza, thank you both so much for joining us today. And for a great conversation. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add. I didn't mean to cut you off there.
I think that's it. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Awesome. Well, thank you both again. And hopefully we'll see you back on the stage soon.
Awesome.